Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you everyone for having me. It's been a pleasure and an honor being here. Secondly, yeah, sure. I'm Kevin Riedl, coming from Austria. Basically, own a small Web3 software agency in that regard. And yeah, what we do is we mostly develop smart contracts and DApps. We also do a lot of consulting for sure around that because that's usually necessary to educate the customer. That's what we do most of the time, and that involves so-called NFT collections, decentralized organizations, which is nothing else than some kind of voting mechanism where people can vote with the assets onto some decisions, and tokens and even infrastructure. And yeah, what I'm really passionate about is actually education. So if you have seen my LinkedIn or other social media channels, you will see that I post multiple times a day some kind of educational content, actually tries to bring value. And yeah, that's actually what I do for the most part. And yeah, I hope I can bring some value to this today. And yeah, I would say, yeah, any questions at any time, feel free to drop them into the chat bar. I think I tend to keep things highly interactive because that usually helps to get things into the direction that helps everyone the most. I would say, yeah, Robert, I don't know if you want to jump in here, but yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah, maybe a little bit of context. I'm teaching children, 10 to 15-year-olds, like every summer for the past X years. Basically, I work with a non-profit organization in Austria in that regard. And yeah, this year we did the first ever smart contract or blockchain course, which was really high risk because we had 5 days kids had to develop. It was an actual software development course. And yeah, at the end of the week, like on Friday, they had to present it on a big stage to their parents, to other teachers and so on. And yeah, that's definitely a big thing, especially because I didn't know if that actually works, And learning how to develop a smart contract is not an easy task, especially because you actually need to have a lot of background now. You need to understand wallets, you need to understand how do transactions somewhat work and what is the blockchain, why does it exist. Yeah, that was let's say, the overall structure. And what we do now is we decided to do the same format, but online this time, and for Web3 in general, which means not actually developing smart contracts, but giving a general introduction to children in January, once in German and once in English, so that we have some kind of accessibility here. And yeah, got already quite some registrations, around 60, sorry. That's quite cool, especially considering that, yeah, I would say parents or children are not that easy to reach when it comes to such a high niche topic. And yeah, maybe to give you some context how we actually did it, I think that's something that you might be more interested in, besides what we do. And yeah, I would say, give you some context. Yes, in summer we had 5 days to do that, to give them, let's say, the tools to develop a smart contract. And what they were able to do in these, I would say actually 3 days, because the first day was theory maturity, like general introduction, storytelling, like 99%, really came from, let's say, 2008 Bitcoin. Governments actually dislike blockchain. Why everything gets more expensive, and all these kind of things. I talked about scams, wallets, and yeah, all that stuff basically. And as you can imagine, that was like definitely the funniest and most exciting day, all of them, because the kids got like super I would say, yeah, extroverted, excited at that time, asked a lot of highly contextual and deep questions. And that was already, I would say, a great starting point, because knowing, understanding why this technology is actually here helped them a lot throughout the week when we actually got to develop things. So what we did is we talked at Monday, basically, what are smart contracts, and even had a quick look at the code itself. And on the next day, we basically jumped right into it. But, I explained what NFTs are, what tokens are, and that was basically the goal. I either told them, if you want to do something easier, let's try a token, regular security token, that you can trade on the blockchain, which is already, I would say, exciting enough. And yeah, and a separate NFT collection. And the fun thing is, these kids were, I would say, crazy. 3 teams out of 6 developed a token that is tradable on a blockchain. 4 teams of 6, which already means that some teams made multiple projects in these days, by the way.
Very cool.
Awesome. Glad you like it.
Yeah, that's really exciting.
Yeah, teaching the youth about, Web3
And it's basically the future. So you guys
Mhm.
are really giving these kids like a leg up on like what's really coming down in the future. That's very awesome. I wish I would have learned this in 2008 when it first came out.
Yeah, well, at that time, Bitcoin was slowly emerging the following years, right? There was no real smart contract discussion or something like that. So, but yeah, fully agree. Me too. Would have loved someone in that regard. But yeah, that's definitely an exciting thing. For us, it's less about, let's say, what it brings us, it's more something, for us, sure, it's great marketing, it's great branding, right? But in the end, it's just fun. Because if you see the passion or excitement in children's eyes, that's just cool. It's something different besides the daily business. Yeah, but one thing I would state here is I don't think education per se is actually the goal for Web3, because from my point of view, I guess it should be more like abstracted away. People shouldn't recognize that they use blockchain. For sure, if you want to build a product or project, then you need to know, but otherwise, in best case, you don't. That's it. Yeah, sure. I would say the most important thing when any company approaches us is why? Why do you want to get into Web3? And it's less about, let's say, ethical discussion. It's more about the use case, the business case. What does Web3 for you? What would make your product better if you add, I don't know, NFTs or DAOs or whatsoever to it? there needs to be a reason to utilize that technology. Should never go in any business, in any startup, tech first. It should be always business case or people first, understanding what we need to build, and then comes the how. And if the how includes Web3, awesome. And I definitely think that a lot of business can benefit from Web3, but I'm also convinced that not every business should be in Web3, because there's a general rule of thumb that says blockchain is slow and expensive in comparison to centralized solutions. So there's a reason why centralized databases and centralized companies like Facebook, Google, and so on, or Alphabet, Meta now, have such a high, let's say, ability to scale, are such reliable, are that large. And yes, Web3 companies can and will become really, really large as well. But it doesn't make sense to put everything on the blockchain. It just degrades UX because you always need to pay for things. It makes things slower and it complicates things. It makes development of the product much more expensive as well. As you might already know, Web3 developers are super expensive. And yes, the price will go down the next few years because more people get into it, but that won't change. It's still, let's say, a special skill. There are much more Web2 developers than Web3 developers. That won't change like for the next 5 to 10 years, highly likely. So that's definitely something to consider as a company, I would say. Yeah, sure. Great question. For sure, everything that I say now is just opinionated. Right? For sure, there are definitions out there, but in general, especially when it comes to the so-called metaverse, I have heard all kinds of definitions. Some people say that metaverse is a 3D world, just like spatial. Some people even claimed, and I'm really talking about an expert here that wrote a couple of books and is really well known, even states that the metaverse can be in textual format, so it doesn't even need to be visual, to the necessity to utilize blockchain or not. So there's a wide range of what the metaverse actually might be or is not, if it's already there, if it already exists, or if it doesn't. So the metaverse is definitely the most difficult thing to define, especially also when it comes to AR, VR, how does that play into it? From my point of view, I definitely think the metaverse, yeah, it's just a term, but I guess the hype around all of it would be like a virtual world where you can actually own things, which means it necessarily involves blockchain in some kind of sense, and you are able to actually be immersed in that, which is a buzzword by itself, but just actually means, wait, you utilize virtual reality or augmented reality technology, so you're actually inside the world. You're not staring at the screen and look from it on the outside. You know, that would be my metaverse, let's say, somewhat definition. When it comes to Web3 in general, is for me really simple. That means everything that basically involves blockchain. That's Web3. Web3 is just a fancy new name for crypto, just a fancy new name for blockchain. That's Web3 for me, which means you have a website that opens or uses your wallet in some kind of way, or reads from the blockchain or writes to the blockchain. I don't know. But that's Web3 for me.
So
That
I'm
also
really new.
includes, yeah?
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry. So I'm really new to this, and you guys use the word Web 3. Did you guys have a Web 1, a Web 2 prior to Web 3?
Yeah, great question. When we look at the actual history of the internet, right? Well, I'm too young to actually know the years, but around 2000, there were the first couple of websites, right? The so-called Web 1. And it was, you could imagine it like a really, really super basic and cheap looking website. It's just sometimes a blank white screen with some text on it. So basically looking like a blog post without any nice styling or whatever. So it's really just like a book, a white screen plus the text, for example. Things like that, like a web that doesn't move, that doesn't adapt to your user, for example, that's called the Web 1. And at some point, we got social media. We got platforms like Facebook. We got many other apps that are interactive. I would also count Google to that for sure, because you can type in on the website, or you have an identity somewhere on that website, and the content, the information that you see is dynamic and completely personalized to you. So it's not a static website, a static page where every user on the planet sees the same content, but instead it's dynamic. Things can change and will change. Things might move, are animated, things like that. That's Web 2. And yeah, now we have possibility to actually own things thanks to blockchain and wallets. And that just adds new business models on top of that. So that's the thing actually. I hope that answers the question.
It
Somewhat
did. Thank you.
easy manner.
Yeah, that
Cool.
was very clear and concise. That very much like made me understand. I was like, oh, okay, so that's just like the first version, and then our second version. The way I kind of thought of it was like the original internet when our computers were like black with green fonts, and then our 20th century internet, and now we're going into like the 3D virtual world, and we're going into virtual reality.
Yeah. Well, as I've mentioned before, that's all just terms. You know, what is, it's actually, from my point of view, just an opinion all the time. Web 3 is definitely something that's more closely defined, but metaverse and most of the other things are highly dynamic, I'd say, in terms of the definition. Well, looking at Web 1 and Web 2, we still see both coexist. Web 1, we still have static websites. For example, most company websites are in fact somewhat Web 1 because the content doesn't change, right? Definitely some things that move, that are interactive because you can fill out a form or things like that. But most company websites and project sites are very much static. So one could argue that it's somewhat Web 1. So I think it's the same for Metaverse Web 3. So basically, these company websites will, in my opinion, definitely stay there, will be still used as a means of distributing or showcasing information. But there will definitely also be some kind of occasions where, I don't know, maybe when it comes to meetings or just gamifying things, meetings or whiteboard sessions or maybe talks like this. That's definitely more fun than a regular, let's say, Zoom call, something like that. These kind of things, yeah, I definitely think that, and especially when it comes to further gamifying this with, I don't know, with popes, which means you get some kind of badges or medals for participating, some kind of webinars and so on, and you can showcase that on your profile. I don't know, things like that. I guess are definitely coming and will be more widely adopted. What I don't think, it really depends on the business model for sure. If you're a fashion company, I fully comply with that and fully think that they will have like locations in the metaverse. But if, let's say, you are a regular company, I don't think you need or will have actual building in the metaverse. I could be wrong. Could be wrong. Maybe it's going to be a place to showcase case studies, I don't know, to present past prior projects to your potential clients, or grab a cool, nice coffee, a first talk or something like that, consulting sessions. Could be. I don't know. And it might depend on the business. But yeah. Let's see. I don't know. That's my answer. Mhm. Okay.
Can you do posting? Can you do a little 360 view because I'm recording so I can get like a nice little 360 of it?
Also, I can see it, by the way. Yeah.
Perfect.
Uh, the question is twofold for me, to be honest. Yes, I definitely think the industry is going that way, simply because it's a standard way of approaching these kind of things. As a company, well, I need to launch an NFT or token, and then I can check, does that user own this token and has access to this? But that's nothing new. That's something that you could have done already 10 years ago. So you don't need necessarily Web3 or blockchain for that. You could have just saved it into your regular database. You could give people the opportunity to sell their, let's say, ticket on that marketplace in a centralized way. And all these things exist already. Just look at console games. We have accomplishments, we have skins, people trade gaming accounts, all that kind of stuff. And that also branches out in many other industry sectors as well. So it's definitely nothing new, which is good, because that means the business model, business case is here. But it also means that it's not necessarily needed to do that on the blockchain. So thinking about the UX perspective, that you need to own a wallet to actually do these kind of things, makes it more difficult, because you need to think about how do we give a user a wallet, maybe even without them recognizing. Just look at Reddit, for example, that launched their avatar NFTs. People didn't even know these are NFTs in the beginning. And yeah, that's the actual thing that you would need to do. Make it so abstract that people don't even recognize that you use this technology. So that makes it more difficult, actually, again. And so the question for me is, or I'm quite convinced with that, and I know many people that agree with that as well. Many companies, also big ones, do it for, let's say, targeting the younger generations. So it's less about, is that the perfect solution for the problem that I want to solve, but more about targeting younger people that are convinced and like that technology. So I think it's more about that most of the time when companies go into the metaverse, when they, I don't know, sell virtual fashion. For sure, that's a business case, a separate one. But these kind of things, I think it's less about, oh, well, we need blockchain, we need decentralization because we want to give power to the people. If they actually would like to do that, then things would look much different. And that's definitely not the case. So that's my take, actually. Hope that answers the question. Well, it definitely gets easier. Many companies focus on UX, right? Improving the user experience. When, let's say, there are already solutions out there where you can log in with your Gmail account, Facebook, I don't know, whatever you want to, or email address. And that solution automatically generates a wallet behind your back that you can use. So there are solutions out there, and there are definitely many more things that are being built right now that solve these kind of things. But the question always is, if you use these kind of things, then you always give up some kind of decentralization and ownership and power aspects, no matter how decentralized that solution claims to be. Because it's always an abstraction. And the more abstract something is, which means you make it easier for someone to use something because you hide things, and the curtain, I think, is the correct word, then you always have some kind of power dynamic here. You always have information that the user maybe doesn't have, or some control that the user doesn't have. So that just means, well, why do you use blockchain then at all? Because blockchain isn't there for, let's say, the two big claims that people and companies have is decentralization, control, which means nobody can take that asset away from me. That's, in my opinion, the strongest value proposition. And then we have that much, much weaker, but somewhat maybe valid claim. It's about interoperability, which means that you can exchange these assets easily between different companies, organizations, because you have a independent data layer, which means the blockchain itself that saves your NFTs, for example, your assets, your tokens, what you own. And that definitely makes it easier to some extent, but for quite some time it will be much more difficult because most people don't have the know-how and most UX solutions aren't there yet or not mature enough yet. So the only reason to use blockchain right now for me is to actually go into that ownership and decentralization route. So yeah, it's always twofold, right? DeFi, decentralized finance, for example, that's one of the strongest use cases out there, which means you own, for example, Bitcoin, you own Ethereum, you own some kind of token, and the bank can suddenly say, well, we don't give it to you, or well, we are bankrupt, or well, you know, you are sanctionized, which is already being battle tested thanks to Tornado Cash and whatever solutions without trying to confuse you now. But what I want to say is blockchain enables you to actually own money just as you own actually your cash, you know, in your own actual wallet at home. So cryptocurrency actually enables you to own these kind of things in a digital way. If you have something on your bank account, you don't own it. The bank didn't even have it on their bank. They usually lend a lot of it to other parties. And then these parties maybe lend it away again. And that gives, let's say, an incredible large leverage. And that's why banks oftentimes get in trouble. If you lend the same $100 to 10 people, that's an issue. Sorry.
So basically when you say decentralized, you say moving away from like those traditional banking systems.
Yeah. I'm maybe some context. I own a small part of a traditional finance company as well.
Okay.
And we have organized a conference in October in Frankfurt, Germany, where we invited asset managers, bankers, like all these traditional people. And they didn't know that I'm a smart contract developer actually. And they pitched, or some of them pitched blockchain to me. All of them know, no matter how conservative they are really conservative oftentimes, they know that blockchain, DeFi, decentralized finance is the future. All of them. There's not a single doubt anymore. They're convinced. And that's the crazy part. I'm talking about London Stock Exchange, also people from there, and so on, and the list goes on. That's just crazy. So that's definitely, I would say, the strongest use case and the most mature.
Amazing.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Zuckerberg.
Well, the question always is, does that need to be decentralized, saved on a blockchain? But yeah, I definitely like that. So I would, although I would say this goes actually in the direction of so-called POAPs, which is nothing else as an abbreviation for proof of attendance protocol, which means you get an NFT on a blockchain that you don't need to pay gas for, because that company that issues those POAPs pays for it. And those NFTs are actually used to prove that you attended an event like this, for example. So we could issue POAPs for this event if we would have planned to do that. So that would be, that's already there. And I really like this. The question just is, will people care in, let's say, 2 years if they, it's just a souvenir, you know. For some events it's nice, but for most of them, people don't actually care. You know, right now it's fancy, in 2-3 years maybe it's not. So that's the question. Yeah. Yeah, great question. Basically, that's always the thing, right? Does it need to be a smart contract, which means an NFT is a smart contract by definition, but you could solve it in a centralized database as well. There's not many reasons why you can't do that. Well, you can provide a marketplace to sell these things. You can do a lot of these things. And for some industry sectors, these marketplaces exist. So that's the first question. Does it need to be a smart contract? That's always the thing, right? The advantage definitely is if it's really easy for you to create the NFT, because you can use one of these no-code tools, which means you just click a couple of buttons and you have your NFT, then it's definitely easier to use that than actually building some kind of app or something like that where you can buy and sell something in a digital way. So the blockchain definitely enables you to make this checkout and buying selling process of assets, any kind of assets, much more streamlined and much more easier, right? So that's definitely the case. So maybe from a complexity standpoint, that's definitely a big plus. And from the utility side, to get back to your original question, if I'm not mistaken, that's a cool part, yeah, because there's a standardized way of validating if you own something. It's easier for other solutions, for example Discord, to check do you own that NFT. If you wouldn't have that, then Discord would need to go to your own custom REST API and check if that specific user has that. That definitely makes things much more easier, also way easier. I guess that's the main benefit of using NFTs in that regard for providing utility, that it's super easy to sell, buy, and prove that you own these things. And what kind of utility, the sky is the limit. You can do anything that you can imagine. Well, as mentioned before, there are definitely reasons for doing it on the blockchain and also reasons for not doing on the blockchain. From the cost perspective, complexity side point of view, and yeah, I would also say from the UX perspective right now, it would make sense to do it in a centralized way. When it comes to a process like you want, yeah, sure. Sure. Yeah, sure. Two things regarding that. In general, first thing, that's when we talk about Polygon, a really tiny cost, right? Indeed. That's a transaction fee. You always need to pay for transactions. If you do it in a centralized way, there are no transaction fees. First thing. When we talk about, let's say, yeah? Sorry. When you do anything that involves the blockchain, which means you want to buy, sell, create an NFT, for example, which is a digital artwork, then you need, or you basically save it on the blockchain, which is just a database that's distributed around the world. So there are many computers. One is in Asia, one is in the US, and both have the same set of data. And for that very same reason, you need to pay these people that have these servers to actually save your data, your information, which means you just bought this piece of art. And these people around the world, all of them need to save that. That costs money. On some blockchains, it costs way more. On some, it costs way less. That can go from a couple of cents or even a fraction of cents to hundreds of dollars, depending on demand of the blockchain and the type of blockchain. Right now, all of them are quite cheap because of the bear market, because of the prices of crypto falling. Yeah. Yeah. I would say 50-50. It's completely correct. Nothing wrong about that. The thing is, if a computer goes down and then another one is still there to hold that data, that's something that's actually a Web2 principle, right? Google has many servers as well. If one of them explodes or burns, Google is still there and working. What the blockchain does, and you said that perfectly, it doesn't allow any of these servers to just change the information. And that's what it is about. If something is saved on the blockchain, the theory or game theory around it is nobody can manipulate it, nobody can change it without the majority of these people that control the network agreeing to it. And usually the incentives, the stakes for these people operating that network are really high, that they are honest with it, So there's a really low incentive most of the time to actually try to scam people. And that's why blockchain is so powerful. So that's the main thing. That's why DeFi, decentralized finance, is so exciting. There's no bank, nobody that can take it away from you, because nobody can change the information who owns something. And that's the cool thing about it. I hope that answers the question. 100%, yeah. An example. Let's talk about okay. First of all, there are different types of blockchain. I don't want to get too deep into that, but when we talk about blockchain in this context or in terms of Web3, we always talk about so-called public blockchains, which means the data that you save onto that network, that blockchain, is visible to everyone. Everyone can see it, everyone can verify it, everyone can save something onto the blockchain if they pay that fee to these people operating the network. But there are also other types of blockchains that restrict that ability, which means only some people can save data on the blockchain. Only some people can see the data that is saved on the blockchain. That, for example, then involves use cases like logistics. You don't want the whole world to see where your goods are currently are and who it at the very same moment actually has it, you know. That can be cool for some tiny use cases, because most of the time it's a security issue. If you transport something really valuable, then you don't want people to see that all over the world, right? But still, it can make sense to use a blockchain because these parties, these people that are involved in that supply chain throughout that journey don't trust each other. So they had the package last before it got lost, for example. These kind of things. That's first part of the story, where the public blockchain, for example, the things that we talk here about don't make sense necessarily. There are many other things like that. Then we get into things like that sound really silly, and I think they are. Why do you need a decentralized dog or cat app? And I had a potential customer that tried to build something like this. But why do you need to save that data in a decentralized way? Who don't I trust here? Who don't I trust that, I don't know, about that information, but instead saving it on a public blockchain so that everyone can see it? There are no reasons for that, at least no reasons that I can see. And that's definitely a business that I don't think should resolve completely around Web3. Maybe there are some tiny things where it could make sense, but for 90% around this specific use case, it probably doesn't. So these kind of considerations one always has to undertake. What's the value that blockchain would add here? Who don't I trust? Who do I trust? That's the main question. All good, mate.
I think I asked my questions already.
I think that if I had a question, my only question would be just referring to the NFTs. Do you see the NFTs getting any more advanced, or how I say, more streamlined in the future, to where it's more of a common currency among businesses and other companies and stuff like that? Do you think you'll see more people trading them?
100%. I think the prices will definitely go further down, and because the supply, which means many more businesses, projects, and so on creating NFTs will also lower the general price tag for these kind of things, because there's just way more supply than demand at some point, or already actually. But yeah, it's a cool way of engaging people, of building a community. It's yeah, I think you know, just having an NFT and say, well, as Gary Vee does it, if you know him, if you own that specific animal NFT, this week you have a chance to jump onto a call with me. Oh wow, that's cool. You know,
Yeah.
it's more difficult with other things. So definitely so.
Awesome. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Awesome. That it helps.
That should be it for me.
Yeah, sure. As said, thanks everyone for being here. And yeah, it was really a pleasure. I hope it helped. Oh yeah, I'm really standing in front. Cool. Yeah. So you can already see I'm not really often in the metaverse. Yeah. Okay, awesome.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Kevin.
Kevin.
Bye.
Thanks for coming on the show.